And so it is not acceptable to them at all at the 32,000 square foot level. We have proven to your staff, to the city attorney's office, that the applicant has a great need for space. It is part of their religious doctrine. It is actually written into some of their doctrinal statements as far as the need for space for each of the people that come, their attendees, as well as their staff. And we've shown each of you and to the city attorney's office and to the staff how they use that space, and the fact that they have 4 or 5 classrooms that will be dictated by one classroom, or that they have a staff that's during the day, that they have one staff during the day, they have one staff at night and weekends, and yet they provide space allocated for each of those individuals. And so they have a need for a great deal of space. And there is absolutely no reason to limit the square footage to 32,000 square feet. You don't gain anything by approving 43,916 square feet. We are willing to accept conditions that you can't impose on the church. They're willing to accept a condition of 170 people. They're willing to accept regulations as far as what happens going off-site to get parking. Nancy would have to approve that. She would have to approve a transportation plan as it relates to any off-site parking. The Church of Scientology does not anticipate a need for any off-site parking for any time in the immediate future, or even in the long-term future. Again, if you look at Nashville, which is has 5 times the active membership that the Church of Scientology does here. If you apply those ratios to the Church of Scientology here, there would be, I think it was 45 or 55 spaces required, and that's 5 times the size. And we are proposing to provide 111 parking spaces, which again is 2.4 times what your requirement is, what your code requirement is. That's the only thing that you can impose, is a code requirement of 2.4 times. And that is one space for every 1.5 people in the facility. If you look at other churches within Sandy Springs, other churches, I did an informal survey, looked at a lot of different churches within Sandy Springs, called around. They don't have these limitations. We are imposing those on ourselves. Again, they are regulated by the one space per every 3.5 in their largest assembly room, yet they operate Sunday schools during the same time as their largest assembly room is operating. They also operate their offices and other things at the same time, and so effectively that ratio is more like one space for every 5.5 or 6 people in the building. The bottom line is there's absolutely no reason to deny this request. Your staff has recommended approval pursuant to the alternate recommendation, alternate conditions, which are acceptable to us. We worked with your city attorney's office and with the staff to develop those. Those are acceptable to us. Traffic is not an issue. Parking is not an issue. Use is not an issue. We are adjacent to non-residential uses. Your ordinance allows a church in residential. We're on a 5-lane highway. This is not imposing a mega church into the middle of a subdivision. There are churches in Sandy Springs on 2-lane roads. We're on a 5-lane U.S. and state highway with a light, with adequate parking, and we've proven that through our studies. Glad to answer any questions that you have with regard to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood. Are there any questions from the members of the council? If not, then we'll close the public hearing and we'll
I
start.
have some
Oh,
questions.
you have a question?
Yes, I have a question of Nancy Leathers, and I have a question for the 2 lawyers, if I could. Ms. Leathers, or Ms. Ruffin? Ruffin, I'm sorry. Is it true that the assertions that this application complies with a comp plan in terms of the density of 25,000 square feet per acre. Is that correct, or?
That is correct. The 43,916 square feet comes out to 24,671 square feet per acre.
At 1.7 acres of property?
Yeah,
So you take 43,916 divided by 1.7?
1.78.
All right. Just 1 second, please. 1.78. Thank you very much. Okay, second question. To either of you, is it true that section 19.36 of the zoning code limits additional off-site parking to 20% of the total requirements?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that I would like the city attorney to respond more fully on that question because he's looked at that for me.
Sure. The code section 19.361, B2 provides that there's a 20% requirement for off-site parking. I think that under this application, that parking was previously allowed, that area was previously allowed in the easement area that was already adjacent to this parcel. So there is a distinction. There is a distinction in that the area we're talking about was already part of this by virtue of the previous zoning in Fulton County. So I'm saying that's a distinction. And
Therefore, you're saying that we are not in contravenance of that section of the code?
I will tell you that it's a distinction that's probably not addressed specifically in that code.
Okay, but isn't it true that this entire application is coming before us for a whole new land use? And therefore, just like we are in a couple of minutes, we're going to deal with Holy Innocents. The 41 spaces that are the opponents are suggesting are non-exclusive and therefore fall under the additional parking. Would that not obviate your grandfathering suggestion?
With the new use coming in, it would be a very clear distinction if this was brought in and they were attempting to append that easement area onto the parcel. With the pre-existing fact that these were both part of a zoning, I think we have an issue there, and if Nancy, in interpreting the ordinance, says that she thinks that meets that requirement, I would absolutely defer to that interpretation on it.
And so the opponent's argument that the 41 easement, non-exclusive easement spaces that exist on for the patrons of the post office, you're saying are not, under your viewpoint, additional parking?
I'm going to say, as a matter of law, when I read that code section, I don't tell you that it's got to go. As I read this, the code section of our zoning ordinance, and I understand that that easement area was involved in the prior zoning, and they were both brought forward in the prior zoning as one parcel, I would not say that that is a basis to reject this at this time.
Thank you, Mr. McClendon. Ms. Briggs?
Nancy, let me get some clarification on something. There's been some discussion about the cap of 170. And there was discussion, I think Woody had mentioned that we do have caps in some other things, and he mentioned the schools. Is it my understanding, or am I understanding it correctly, that the school cap is, we don't monitor that in the same fashion that we might have to monitor this? It is a once a year, they send us the total number from their enrollment. Is that correct? That's correct. However, these conditions